Political director, host of Meet the Press, my pal, Chuck Todd. Hey, Chuck.
Hi, Andrea.
So, first of all, what are the scenarios?
First of all, happy Super Tuesday.
Happy
I
Super
have to
Tuesday.
say, it's a pretty exciting day. We have a lot of unknowns.
A lot of unknowns.
Wow.
The Sanders folks were taken by surprise, clearly.
Yeah.
Mike Bloomberg under pressure now to get out because he is now not the conventionally, understood to be,
Right.
Possible contender to take down Donald Trump. It's a completely new primary.
It's not since John McCain 08 have we seen a turnaround,
Wow.
literally from where you thought this candidacy is never recovering to frontrunner status. Now, we're not saying Joe Biden's a frontrunner yet, just like it took John McCain he had to win March. It's really a similar period. It was New Hampshire that rescued him, then South Carolina reinforced it. South Carolina rescues Joe. Let's see if this reinforces it. Look, we came up, I think your over-under number on Bernie Sanders is 600. If he has 600 or more delegates tonight, that's a big deal. That means he's close to having 50% of all delegates available tonight. The higher over 600, the better it is, the more appropriate it would be to call Bernie Sanders a frontrunner. But if he can't be over the number 600 tonight, or after California comes in, and we know that that's going to be delayed for a little bit. But essentially, a lot of us will probably be able to figure that California number out before it's official. If he's, the farther under 600 he is, the more this is suddenly tipping into Biden's favor. Look at the Biden-Bloomberg combined delegate total tonight. If it's greater than Bernie's, that's a big red flag for Bernie. If it's not, that's a bit of a yellow flag for Biden. And then there's some symbolic places that we're watching. Texas symbolically. Look, I think that this surge is going to be good enough. There's probably going to be a fairly even split out of Texas. But what if Sanders net zero out of Texas? What if Biden actually is the guy that wins Texas by a point or two? That just symbolically would be a
conceivable that Sanders wouldn't reach 15%?
No, it's not just that. It's just that because Biden does well enough that at the end of the day, they've split it, and they end up, and Sanders doesn't get the big haul out of Texas that he expected. So that's a symbolic place to look. North Carolina is another one to look to see who wins there. And then another question we have is who's going to make a threshold in more states, Bloomberg or Warren? The more states that Bloomberg makes threshold in, the better for Bernie, right? The more states Warren makes threshold in, arguably the better for Biden, because you assume Bloomberg's hurting Biden and Warren's hurting Sanders.
And how much can Bloomberg benefit by the early voting in that his real problems were the two debates?
The place that I think I'm most curious about this actually is Tennessee. Because Tennessee was basically one of these states that nobody else really targeted until very late.
And he was up.
And he was there all by himself. Oklahoma's another one. Arkansas is another one. Arkansas and Tennessee, though, in particular. But if you want to test this early vote issue and how much of it mattered, I assume Bloomberg makes threshold in a place like Tennessee for sure, simply because of that.
Of course, Tennessee's had this tremendous tornadoes. It's now 22 people dead. They've had to close some polling stations, and the state capitol is closed.
That's this is national. That's the biggest part of the state, and that could have a significant impact on the numbers. And we know states where the early vote is more dominant in the vote totals, that's usually better for Bernie.
One of the things that I've been told is that, look, Mike Bloomberg's rationale for getting into this was that Joe Biden was too weak to take on Donald Trump.
Does he look weak now?
He doesn't look weak now. If Biden does well, the rationale, and Bloomberg doesn't, the rationale is gone. And I think what you would expect then is that Bloomberg would do what he has said he would do, is throw his support, his money, which is critical to Biden.
I assume he wouldn't finish the week, because if he stayed in through March, he really would start helping Bernie. If he stays in Florida, but particularly the March 17th states of Ohio, Illinois, Arizona, and Florida, if Bloomberg is staying in, that is a big help to Bernie and does take a chunk out of Biden. So if Biden is as strong as the Biden people think they're going to be tonight, and frankly, they don't know. This is all, nobody knows. The only people tracking may have been Team Bloomberg. And even then, these numbers are shifting and moving so fast. We saw Democratic primary voters have been holding their ballot. There's a reason why Amy Klobuchar went from 0 to 20, basically, in New Hampshire after a debate performance. We saw it with Biden. So nothing will shock me tonight on Biden's performance.
Stay tuned. Be with us. Watch us all.
2 a.m. Are you ready?
I am ready. I'm ready for 5 p.m., in fact.
5 p.m., 2 a.m. I love it. We're not going to stop.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.